everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield holding it down for us in the DraftKings studio in Boston. Great show for you guys coming up today. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKingsNetwork.com, the YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, and more. Tom Haberstroh going to join us in a little bit. The Finder Substack is where you can check him out doing analytics insider work for the Trailblazers, as well as some great stuff over here at Meadowlark Media. Going to talk about some of what we've seen in the association. A ton of scoring up right now as we head towards the All-Star break. Some of the 65-game rules creeping into certain rotation as well there. As we mentioned yesterday in terms of the time of the show, want to keep reinforcing for everybody. We will be on at a later time next week during Super Bowl week. We are going to be 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday next week while we're out at Radio Row. You'll catch the best of GoJo and Golic from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern in the morning in the spot where we're always on. But speaking of things that will not change, Wednesdays still mean something around here. No, it's not on a Tuesday this week. No, it's not at a different time this week. Charlotte Wilder, our great friend and co-host of the Oddball podcast with Amin El Hassan here on the DraftKings Network, kind enough to join us now. Okay, never mind.
Oh, we'll get her in a minute.
That's so, showbiz, baby.
I think this is where we are, Mike. We've seen that coaches are going back to their teams to redo deals, and we're trying to do that with Charlotte to get her to come back to this team, but it seems like that's still up in the air. As you know, she was supposed to be on, now she's not. I don't know if she's playing hardball. Is she being Ben Johnson and asking for a lot of money? We're gonna have to ask her when she comes on what's going on.
There we goes. 3 decades of radio firmly ingrained into the on-the-fly shift in topic. That's how you transition to the news of the day yesterday. That's right. We had some interesting news when we logged off the show yesterday. We were all assuming coming off this weekend of the conference championships that we were going to get some news about any number of the coordinators that we had seen, but particularly people had been talking about Mike McDonald from the Baltimore Ravens, their defensive coordinator, and Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, who everyone expected to go and take any of the 2 jobs left. But most notably, Dad, the Washington Commanders had been the team most people had associated with him. And we got the news yesterday that basically while the Commanders brass was in the air to come and visit Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, their defensive coordinator, for interviews, Ben Johnson communicated to them that he was taking his name out of the running and he was heading back to Detroit. Dad, there's a lot of reasons that people are going to wonder, but why do you think ultimately Ben Johnson decided to reverse course on this after being now for 2 years in a row one of the hottest head coaching candidates?
I mean, maybe, there were 8 teams that started in this, but Detroit kept winning as well. Again, you can back channel a lot of things to find out information. Maybe his choices and he was the hot coordinator, maybe his choices weren't Washington or Seattle. Maybe he had a different favorite that he had, and that door closed. So it was going to be, well, if I'm going to go to this team, we heard that for the Chargers, he was basically wanting for his services to be head coach $15 million, which he's not going to get. But hey, if he wants to ask for it, you can ask for whatever you want. Depends on what you get. I would say, like anything else, Mike, it's probably a combination of things. He wasn't getting the money he wanted. Maybe the team he wanted, again, had already taken a head coach. So he said, I'll wait another cycle. I'm well paid in Detroit, certainly not as well paid as you're going to be as a head coach, just kind of for comparison's sake. Average coordinator in the NFL makes about $1.5 million. The top guys make anywhere from 3 to 4. So even put him on the top end, I'm sure if he signed somewhere, he could have got at least, Mike, a 6-year, $60 million deal at $10 million a year, which is a hell of a lot more than you make as a coordinator. But there are more things that go in it, and him probably knowing that's still going to be there for me down the road. If I don't get the situation I want, why leave the situation I'm in where our team was just in the NFC Championship game?
Yeah, this is pretty privileged for Ben Johnson, right? He knows that his situation is going to remain good like this because what's the worst case scenario? I go back to an offense in Detroit that I know exactly how it operates, exactly what it's capable of, exactly what we're building towards. And I see all the stuff that people are saying, and I'm sure this is a factor in it. that yes, Dan Campbell has built a great culture around that Detroit Lions building. And I have no doubt people enjoy being there and enjoy working there. And so that also, I'm sure, makes it easy interpersonally to go back to a place that you know is a good landing spot for you, your family, everything else. I saw Ben Johnson saying that him and his wife really like that area. They really like being a part of this team. But Dad, you're right. It's the knowing that the opportunity is still going to be there. And then on the other side, like, yeah, if he's got a hard and fast line for a price in his head, I can sort of understand that because I'm sure he looks around and sees, hey, when you take these jobs, there's a lot of problems that come with this. There's a lot that can go wrong. And if it does go wrong, you don't know when this kind of opportunity is going to come back and show itself again. And so I want to make sure it's worth my while and going to a place where I'm going to have what I need to be successful immediately. Because as we see, you don't really get a chance to sit around and build it very slowly in most organizations right now.
Yeah, you just have to make sure you're not pricing yourself out of the market. Well, and again, we're just hearing this from insiders. If he's asking for 15, again, he's not going to get 15. He's not. So, but I have a hard time believing he wouldn't understand that and realize if he asks for 15, maybe you'll get 12. You know, do some people think if he holds out long enough, he's going to get 15? Personally, I don't. We'll see salaries go up every year. Obviously, people will make more money each year. But I think, like I said, the combination of if it's not particularly a team he wants to be at, he's going to want more. If it's a team he wants to be at, maybe he'll negotiate and take a little less. Negotiation is fine. Like I said, ask for what you want, they offer what you want, and you meet somewhere. What will be interesting for Detroit now that we know he's back is you have this year, and you wonder, one thing we've never talked about with Detroit is a window, and they have so many young players that window should be open for a while. But two of the most important positions, this could be the last year. Ben Johnson will be a hot commodity again next year, right? Will he take a job next year? And Jared Goff is on the last year of his deal, right? So would they be having this be their last year and then going into a new O coordinator and a new quarterback the year after? So you wonder within the building the thought process around that.
Yeah, I certainly think what the last 2 years have afforded them is time to very carefully think through a succession plan, because this is the second offseason Ben Johnson's been a name like this that everyone's brought up. And so I'm sure Dan Campbell and company have already been, ideating exactly what they're going to try and do once this happens. And so that's going to be the next step for them. But what a huge win to start the year. This was a coup for Lions fans last year when they were able to keep him around for one more season. And we saw the fruit it bore, right? They got to the NFC Championship this year, in part because of that, because you can now go into an offseason where you're not worried about changing all that continuity, changing the verbiage for the way that you do things, or just learning your communication style with the person that's going to be at the helm of an offense that was one of the better ones around the NFL this last year. Speaking of negotiations, we have gone back to the table, and it appears that we've been able to strike a deal to bring back Wilder Wednesday here. So Charlotte Wilder, I believe, is with us now after what was a very touch-and-go situation. Good morning, Charlotte. How we doing?
Good morning, guys. I am so sorry. That was, remember how we talked about like getting on to in a tough situation, how I pretend I'm an astronaut? Do you remember that, Golic? Senior, you thought that you were like, whoa, what?
Explain that one again, because I don't think we remember it right offhand. So explain that one again to people, Charlotte, how you think so funny. You're an astronaut.
You remember every single thing I've ever said, right? No, so when something's not working or when I'm in a high pressure situation, such as when I can't hear the sound coming out of my computer, I'm like, okay, Charlotte, don't panic. Pretend you're an astronaut. Pretend you're in space and you need to fix your spaceship. And if you don't stay calm and fix it, you're going to plummet into the ocean. And I am sad to report that this morning I would have just dropped right out of the sky. But we are here now. My headphones work. My microphone seems to be working. And I've loved listening to you guys talk about Ben Johnson.
Charlotte, what you said about the astronaut thing, I always do that, but it's combat divers. I remember I saw a documentary about combat divers and what they have to deal with. and how when you're underwater with the scuba gear and you're being attacked, they'll blindfold them, they'll pull the plug on their air, they'll do all this stuff while they're hitting them, and you just have to very calmly assess where you know everything is, put it back together so that you can literally breathe again underwater. So exactly what you were talking about, how to stay calm under pressure while apparently you're getting ready to fight people as a scuba diver.
Oh my God. First of all, is that a thing? Where can I watch the doc on that? And secondly, I like that we both have like completely unhinged expectations of where we might one day find ourselves.
Yeah, Dad, what do you do
I'm
when you're in a
amazed.
pressure situation? What do you imagine yourself in?
Me? I just make a cup of coffee and wait for it to end. I mean,
So you would definitely be, you would not be breathing underwater and you would have fallen out of the sky, Senior.
I probably would have, but I'd have been like, okay, well, if that's what was meant, if I can't really do a lot about it, then I'm just going to wait till it's done. Or somebody is going to tell me what to try and do because I'm not going to be able to figure it out. So I understand that about myself. So someone will either tell me or I'll just wait there. And if I perish, then I perish. Charlotte, I'm wondering, have you seen the movie Gravity with Sandra Bullock? Because
No.
what you've explained is exactly that movie where she is in space basically alone and she's trying to figure out the problems to get back to Earth. So I thought you were basing your situation off of that movie because that's exactly what that movie is about.
No, but it sounds to me like whoever made that Sandra Bullock movie owes me some royalties because I thought of it in my head without seeing the movie. So I'm just out here making imaginary money, guys.
You guys should maybe talk to somebody about that. Just like, I don't know.
Everything.
Yeah, like, I don't know. It seems like there's maybe some deep-rooted anxiety going on.
Yes.
Yeah,
For both of
no,
you.
I was about to swear. No joke, Jesse.
Yeah, like,
I mean, that's definitely true in a lot of senses here, but this is about staying calm. This is a means to calm the anxiety by imagining yourself in some of the most anxious situations that mankind
yeah, I was
can
gonna
concoct.
say, I don't know
Yeah.
if that's
I have the answer for both of you because it is pretty interesting that you go down
Xanax?
that road. Here's what's going to help you. Go answer Elmo's tweet on how are you doing, and go ahead and you know.
Oh man.
and
post
explain
out
the
your
coping
feelings,
thing.
and maybe
Explain
that'll
that to
help.
Elmo.
Yeah, to Elmo. So
Look,
Elmo
all
can
I'm saying
help you.
all I'm saying
through
is
this.
technology in this day and age, there's a lot on the user to make it work. And if you're in a situation where, say, you have to join a live show and something's not working, freaking out just isn't going to do you any good. And, you know, whatever method, it's like method acting. I'm like, I'm in a spaceship. You got to fix this. And you know what? Sometimes it works better than others. But ultimately, you know, maybe today, maybe I'm not in the ocean. Maybe today what happened was it's like I started plummeting and then I just like fixed it and turned it around real fast. So it was like touch and go for a moment, but I'm back orbiting the Earth.
You got your parachute to go out now. You got your
There you
parachute to come out of the bag. You were falling down. You were tumbling.
and
you
it's
couldn't
all
get the
just
emergency
downhill
cord to
from
pull.
here, GoJo.
Well,
Hell yeah.
now I figured out the root. I figured out the root of the problem for both of you is that you have fixed stuff in the past. And Mike, you would know this. I don't know squat about modern technology. So I'm just going to sit there until somebody fixes it or tells me how to fix it. And I'm not going to worry if it doesn't happen because I can't control it. You guys are worried too much about being in control. Man, let somebody else do it.
That was deep.
How's that for horrible advice?
No, that was deep. That was pretty good.
No, we appreciate that. Snaps up for that. Speaking of new technology, by the way, and Elmo, we now have a new toy to play around with here at the show. We got a voicemail line. 617-302-7452 is where you can get in touch with the show and have your voice heard. And we wanted to hear from you guys since Elmo was asking everyone how they were doing yesterday. And boy, did he not like the results that he got there. The whole Sesame Street team had to come out to try and basically calm the mental health of everyone 40 and under. But we just want to know how you're feeling about your NFL team now that your season's over, unless you're a 49ers or Chiefs fan. What's your biggest concern? What are you most excited about? Hit us up again. 617-302-7452 is the GoJo and Golic voicemail line. And Charlotte, we were just talking about Ben Johnson, him coming back to the Detroit Lions and what a gift that is for that fan base. We also had the news Bobby Slowik, who was one of the names that was sort of the new Ben Johnson. He was the hot coordinator coming off his season and work with C.J. Stroud. Albert Breer over at SI reported that Bobby Slowik not only coming back, but agreeing to a new deal with the Houston Texans. They're also going to have their quarterback coach Gerard Johnson returning back there as well, which that one is in all of the sea of us trying to game out these people's expectations, what they're thinking. And for Bobby Slowik, Dad, I think this is even a little bit easier than what we saw in Detroit with the Lions, where it's, hey, I understand that all these places that might be trying to hire me, I'm not going to have a CJ Stroud. Like, Jared Goff's a very good quarterback in Detroit. C.J. Stroud, you're eating quarterback caviar in Houston. And so for Bobby Slowik, he knows, man, anywhere else I go, the job is going to get a lot harder than it is right here. So that decision and the domino into then their quarterbacks coach trying to stick around, that one was a little easier for me because now it's, all right, I know Bobby Slowik is going to get a head coaching job eventually. And so if I just stick around here long enough, I could be the offensive coordinator for a team that has that guy playing quarterback and not have to go to a place where they're breaking in a rookie or trying to make some aging veteran work as the third or fourth quarterback who's now played on that team. So this side made a little bit more sense to me given the precious commodity that you've got in the middle of this team right now.
And you said Houston getting caviar, so Jesse knows exactly how they feel having the caviar. But as far as what a monster win for C.J. Stroud here, right? They have both as coordinator and quarterback coach back. This is huge because that's going to end at some point. Bobby Slowik's going to get a head coaching job somewhere. Whether he signed a new deal or not doesn't matter. You elevate from coordinator to head coach. You know, you'll work around that. But this is huge for C.J. Stroud going into his, how they always say the rookie quarterback improves in his second year. Well, hell, I mean, look forward to that. I mean, for what he did his first year, by the way, just got named to the Pro Bowl. You start to replace the players that are in the Super Bowl. So he had a monster year. So Charlotte, I think, while for Bobby Slowik, he's got himself a bright future in the coaching world, I think this is monstrous for C.J. Stroud and that offense to continue to grow under his tutelage.
I do too. I think it's also so rare in the NFL that you keep players with the people who have been good for them. Obviously, it's such a league, it's such a carousel, a league of change, of people going different places. And I always wonder, you know, what could we get if we had maybe a little tiny bit more patience in situations where things were good? And for Bobby Slowik, this is a smart career move because as you said, GoJo, he's working with one of the best, but also if you stay there a year, 2 years longer, your head coaching opportunities the ball's going to be in your court a lot more because the more success you have, the more leverage you have, and the more success you have. I mean, we saw what happened, especially with sort of younger guys. At least Bobby Slowik looks young. Bobby Slowik sort of looks like what I expect every investment banker to look like. Like if you look at his headshots, it's like you could just switch that up for a suit or, you know, like a consultant, or he's got this very, you know, I went to business school vibe about him. And I do think that more time with CJ and that coaching staff is only going to be good for him. Also, I like to check out fans' Reddit pages when moves like this happen. And the headline was for the Texans was Bobby Slowik staying in Houston, period. Rejoice! ! So fans seem to be very happy about this.
Rejoice is right. And you guys both mentioned why this is so rare, and this is the number one thing that keeps staffs and keeps organizations up at night is, we have one of the hot coordinator names. How soon before they're gone and we lose the benefit of all of that time together? Because that communication between player and coach, you could find another really good coordinator, but if him and CJ have that kind of relationship where now, Dad brought it up, you get the full offseason. As a rookie, think about the timeline of events. This is why these rookie quarterbacks take such a big jump in their second year. You go from the combine to your pre-draft workouts to all the meetings in the lead up to the draft itself. You're late to the offseason program because of the draft. You get there in the summer and you're trying to take everything in through a fire hose, and then you go right into the season. It's the longest year for most of these guys because you don't get a real offseason. Now, CJ Stroud is going to be in that building. with the same guy that he was there with last year, with way more time to sit there and digest all of this, to go over it together, and to not have to learn somebody else's communication style that's going to be in his ear during this year coming up. So congratulations, Lions fans, Texans fans, everybody else's fans. We want to hear from you coming up against 617-302-7452. Tell us how you're feeling about your team coming off this season.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Guys, the NBA is giving offense, okay? We've had some serious feats reached. Of the NBA's 10 players to score 70 or more points in a game, 4 have reached the mark in the last 2 seasons, okay? Donovan Mitchell had 71 last January. Damian Lillard followed last February with his own 71. Then Embiid and Doncic both reached that mark last week. And just in general, scoring way up across the league. So take a look at the top scoring team in the NBA over the last decade. So over that last decade, average team scoring has leapt over 15 points per game. Warriors led the NBA in scoring at 108.6 points per game. Now that figure, that would put them at 29th this season. That is how much offense we are seeing in the NBA. Pretty remarkable by these teams, by these players. We hit a little bit on this yesterday, you guys, though. Is it elite offense, or is it just that we've started to get kind of bad at defense?
Well, and I think also an interesting question, kind of in that same vein, Jesse, is it entertaining? Do we like it still? Charlotte, you are a part of a basketball podcast that is 4 days a week, every day but Monday, with Amin El-Hassan here on the DraftKings Network. As you sit around and watch, is it something that's affected the way that you've consumed basketball, seeing all these numbers and how it actually plays out night in and night out?
I mean, not for me. I think part of it, sure, you can say there's less defense. I think it's, Steve Kerr loves to go on his rants about how the rules have favored offense and how, guys are running into us and it's our fault and we need to fix this and the league has prioritized offense, and which, okay, sure, Steve Kerr's smarter about basketball than I am, but I also think in JJ Redick's newsletter in The Old Man and the Three, there was a thing about how the most 60-point games in a season ever was 1962 to 1963. So I don't necessarily think this is as like, oh no, the league is over because everybody's scoring. It's like a lot of people scored before. And I also think that it's not necessarily just threes that guys are hitting. I feel like a lot of people will say, well, the league has changed in terms of guys only shoot threes now. It's like they don't actually. Like, guys have gotten really good at getting points in the paint. Like, they're putting a ton of pressure on these defenses. So on some level, I think there is defense. Like, I think you look at some of these elite defensive teams, like if you watch Drew Holiday on any given night, like, he's plastered to these guys. I think it's sort of a disservice to the players to say, oh, they're not playing defense. I think that they are. I think it's very difficult when you have these players who are this skilled, especially, big guys who have not historically been the ones to score all those points. And you look at someone like Jokic and it's like, all right, well, that's different now. So I think as always, it's way more complicated than most people would want it to be. But I guess, there is some validity to that if we keep seeing all of these points. I do still think it's fun. Like, I think people complain about points or offense, or like nobody plays defense anymore until it stops. And then it's like, do you want to watch like UVA, University of Virginia basketball? Do you want to watch like 47-point games? Do you want people to cheer every shot clock violation? Because like that's the other side of the coin. So I don't know.
I've seen that
GoJo.
in person, by the way. It's the weirdest thing on earth
it's
to actually
crazy.
watch how hard they celebrate for the shot clock violations in Charlottesville.
It is, but we can't just go to that scenario. We can't just say, oh, where we are. Or do we want to go back to the four-corner stall and it's not gonna do that. There has to be a line. We went through the same thing in the NFL, or have gone through that, or are going through that. Quick message to Steve Kerr. You know what's not going to happen? Any rule changes for the defense, Steve. See the NFL. Well, it's not going to happen because
I was going to say, Dad, JJ Redick pointed this out the other day that they have taken some things away from offensive players here in the recent couple of years. Trae Young's move where he used to stop and run back into guys down the lane. They have done certain things to try and help out the defenses for some people like him, Chris Paul, James Harden, who have made a living trying to basically get foul calls and hunt those in the paint.
So, like I said, it's finding a line. How far do you want to let something go? Because we have all the stats. What you go to the Rockets in 2013 and 14 when they were hoisting up, I think, 26 threes a game, which led the league. Now that would be last, like by a mile last. So how far, I think it's a line, Charlotte, of how far you let things go, because the NFL has gone through it. Every rule has gone toward the offense, and it's made the scoring go up, and it's made offenses more exciting, but you have to kind of watch out for at what expense. So that's the job, I think, of the league. We want an exciting product, and excitement a lot of times means scoring, but not the type of scoring in an NFL Pro Bowl game, not the type of scoring in an NBA All-Star game. Somewhere below that, but above, four-corner stall, or how it used to be in the NFL. So I think that's the juggling act. It's always going to favor the offense. In every sport, it's always going to favor it, but you always have to be careful of how far you let it go before you kind of lose the, wow, boy, I love watching the excitement of these offenses to, all right, man, this is just too much. They have every advantage in the world.
No, I get that. Yeah. I think part of it, though, is I feel like, you talked about the 2013, 2014 Rockets, the Daryl Morrification of the three and blah, blah, blah. And I think that's valid. I also think that because NBA athletes are so unbelievably talented, they can adjust very quickly to what the game is or what direction the game is going in or what the rules are. I don't know that the rules have changed significantly enough from then to point at the rules as being the reason this is all happening. I feel like guys see the trends and then work with their trainers to get good at the things that they need to be good at to succeed in the game with the direction it's going. But I don't know. I feel like there is defense is fun, offense is fun. I'm not going to pretend that I'm smart enough to know in terms of how the game is played, what exactly needs to happen to keep that balance, or what the balance of the rules versus the guys, the talent and the training. But for me at this point, it's not. I don't think it's gotten to the point where I'm like, well, this is just ridiculous. Like, this is completely out of hand. I think we have to see how the season keeps going in terms of what do those point totals end up being. Like, if we're having regular 85-point games or 90-point games, it's probably like, okay, well, something might have to change here. But sure. I'm not quite. I don't know that we're quite there for me personally.
No, I would say it's a long season, and I think every once in a while we're searching for things to talk about, especially in the middle of January in the NBA, and so we get a little freaked out when this happens. But, like, I watched the end of the Celtics-Pacers game last night. That was a great game where the Pacers were down huge and stormed back in the second half and made it close. And in the final few possessions, yeah, there had been a lot of scoring, but the Celtics won that game on an incredible defensive stand. Jason Tatum's blocking shots off the backboard, and you still get it to insert itself in those places with some of the best teams in the league. There's still a ton of value. I mean, hell, the Milwaukee Bucks just fired a coach that was 31-11 or 31-14 because the team couldn't play defense well enough to party out there. So there's still a value in it. And I think, Charlotte, your point about the adjustment is so true. This was a league that we thought in the era of pace and space was going to play bigs off the court. And instead, big men adjusted and are now the perennial MVPs of the league and some of the biggest freaks we have. You've got the Robin Lopez's of the world, for God's sakes, who had that weird stat where he didn't attempt a three in the first however many years of his career, and now he's a competent three-point shooter. These guys figure it out, and in an era where they've got to defend more of the court than ever, I still think we're in the process of that because it's really freaking hard to defend as much space as you have to account for now.
Well, let's also say this goes with the times, right? This wouldn't have been the offense back when Shaq and Ewing, and the big fives were. This is a product of the bigs being able to run the floor, the bigs being able to space it out. So that's how the game adjusted. It's like,
well, I think it's the chicken and the egg the other way, where the game made the bigs adjust like that, because you could have had Shaq running the floor earlier in his career.
Come on. Shaq was never someone that I think that could have run in his career like that. Like the players of today, I completely disagree with you. I think it went on athletic ability.
Anything.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Guys, for 20 years, the NFL had a common enemy, and it was the New England Patriots. Okay, they reached the Super Bowl 9 times over 19 years. They adopted the motto, hate us because they ain't us. We know the drill. Charlotte, big Patriots fan. You know the drill. But since Tom Brady left Foxborough, it's been all downhill, okay? And the Chiefs were more than happy to step into the shoes of the Patriots. 4 Super Bowls in 5 years for Kansas City, twice coming away with the Lombardi Trophy. Then you throw in Patrick Mahomes, a casual Hall of Fame quarterback, one of the biggest celebrity fans the league has ever seen, Taylor Swift, and you have a perfect cocktail of hate, as they say. Shake that up nice. Fan bases nationwide are rooting for the Chiefs to lose. So, Charlotte, what are your thoughts here on the Chiefs being the new Patriots?
I'm so glad you asked, Jesse, because I was actually thinking of writing a Substack about this, thewilderthings.substack.com. Check it out. And when I saw this on the rundown, I was like, oh, cool. Okay, so this is something people care about. I should write about this because I actually think dynasties are good. And I think that fans do not realize how much they want a common enemy until that common enemy is gone. I think you can think about a situation where, say this were Niners, Ravens, obviously Baltimore would be happy, and obviously it would be incredible to see Lamar Jackson finally get there. I do think that the buzz around it, in terms of people's emotional reaction to the Chiefs being there, would be less. And I think, obviously the league wants that. The league wants the team that everybody has seen the most and is most familiar with. But I think that there is also something to be said for people and fans rallying around a team that they do not want to win. Because when you don't have a horse in the race, you can watch a game and be like, cool, awesome game, like, love the offense, good defense, everybody. Like, what are you supposed to, if you don't really know the teams, or if you don't really have as much of an idea of what's going on as a casual fan, if it's a Super Bowl, everybody knows what the Chiefs' deal is. Everybody knows about Mahomes. Everybody knows about Kelsey. Everybody knows about Taylor Swift. And there are strong feelings about it. And I just think strong feelings in sports is sort of what the whole point is. So this is actually a fun opportunity for fans to feel something, even if it's hatred and disgust.
So I think what you said, the key thing there, one of the key things, Charlotte, is casual fan. Because strong Chief fans obviously want to see the dynasty continue, and people that aren't Chief fans would love to see it end. But it's a casual fan. And this is what we do. When somebody is climbing the mountain and gets to the mountaintop, we love them. Even on the mountaintop for a little bit, I see Tiger Woods. I mean, how great was that dominant run? And then you're like, okay, this is cool. Now, is there going to be anybody else? We go back to the Steelers winning the Super Bowls. They won from 75 on, 4 of them. Dominance, but then you want to see them knocked off. The 49ers, cool going up. But then, you know what? Let's see someone get knocked off. And then, because you're the casual fan, because you don't know these people except only through the game, I wonder about this thought process, Mike. Is New England, Bill Belichick barely said 2 words. He was always this gruff old man, right? Tom Brady never did any commercials, and he was married to a supermodel, so you were either like, how cool, or you were jealous of his lifestyle, but you never saw him. In Kansas City, everybody loves Andy Reid. You're waiting for him to eat a burger somewhere. Pat Mahomes and Travis Kelce are doing every commercial under the book right now and just seem like more like fun guys. Again, to the casual fan, they see these guys more, and I think it's a more, right now, likable team. Now, does that mean you still don't want to say, okay, we need some new blood here? We all thought it was going to be Baltimore. When's Buffalo going to make the move? But I think because we're talking about casual fans, we're talking about personalities of players on the team as well.
Well, I think with that, though, like, this is, and I've always comped Kansas City more to Golden State for that reason, because they seemed likable at first, but then the exposure starts to have the negative effect for everyone else, because you are the roadblock to a lot of people's happiness. You are going to be the team in Kansas City that ruins the brains of folks in Buffalo and in other cities like that constantly run into that ceiling because they see you as the impediment there. And then it starts to be, well, it's because you're getting all the calls. It's because the league wants this. It starts to beget some of those things because you're making enough people miserable. And Dad, I think the exposure works to be a negative. With Tom Brady and the Patriots, I think the reason people came to hate them was because you had so much of the cheating scandals that popped up. Like, scandal was the personality for that team because we didn't get anything from the outside. It's sort of like what we dealt with Alabama as a dynasty in college football, where there's not a lot of personality to draw from that. But with the Chiefs, they're going to give you plenty of that. Especially, it's kind of like the Patriots. They outsourced it to tight end because Mahomes, while he's out there, isn't someone that's going to be polarizing in the way that he acts largely, but you do get a lot more from these guys. And so that means after a while, especially when you win a lot, it gives people more to latch onto with what they dislike about that.
So, Charlotte, are we there? Because I agree about the personality thing, and that was kind of my point, is you love it going up, but there's a line. And are we at the line, Charlotte, with Kansas? Are we at the line of over, saturation of Mahomes and Travis, and now throw in Taylor Swift to the whole thing? Have we hit that mark with them?
I think it's sort of interesting, yes, in terms of other fan bases. Absolutely. I think other fan bases are like, these guys are ruining my life. I hate them. I think that for the more casual fan, though, especially when you introduce the Taylor Swift element, more casual fans this year were introduced to, and I say casual fan in terms of someone who maybe was not following the league so closely before. You introduce them and it's like, oh, these guys are kind of fun. And I think that new audience that they can bring in isn't there yet. And I also think that the fan base has a lot to do with it. I think Boston will always be the perfect villain because of the success that the city has had, region wide, and of how obnoxious people know Boston fans to be, and of the gloating. I mean, I don't know that if you asked me, like, tell me the stereotypical Kansas City Chiefs fan, I don't know that, and maybe it's because I'm from Boston, but, I've worked in this industry for a while and talked about fans a lot. I don't know that I could tell you exactly what kind of obnoxious a Kansas City a Chiefs fan is. I could tell you exactly what kind of obnoxious and sometimes very, very bad fan the Boston fan can be. But I think that there was also, because of the cheating scandals in New England, there was an us against the world, like, you hate us because you ain't us, like you're not cheating, you're not trying, like this whole idea of the underdog, which brings me to Patrick Mahomes after the AFC Championship said we were the underdogs, and it was something. Tracy Wolfson was like, did that get under your skin? He was like, yeah, people are going to doubt us. And I was like, oh my God, it's over for the Chiefs. Yeah. They are no longer America's sweethearts, because the minute you start claiming we are the underdogs, when you have been to 4 Super Bowls in the past 5 years, the whole country is going to turn on you. And in some ways, Mahomes sort of gave us a gift. He was sort of like, you know what? You want me to be the villain? Like, I'll say the underdog thing, and then GoJo, it's off to the races.
100%. This is so much of what happens with Mahomes is Steph Curry chewing on his mouthpiece. Like, remember how he always used to make the stank face and throw that around? And then after a while, people were like, well, bleep that guy. And now we've seen how many of those NFL Films montages of Patrick Mahomes going up and chirping Max Crosby, or him and Travis Kelce before the game with Justin Tucker's helmet, and all this stuff where people look at that, and before it's cool because he's new and exciting, and now it's, Dad kind of got that feeling of Max Verstappen in Formula One, where, man, if it's the same team winning it every single year, especially coming out of the AFC, now you see that over and over again. It's like, well, it's a lot less cute because he's making my life miserable, and he seems to delight in that.
Yeah, like I said, I think we're hitting that line with them. And the thing about the underdog, that always makes people roll their eyes. I get it when you're one of the top teams and you talk about that. But factually, I would be interested to know, because they actually were underdogs against Buffalo and against Baltimore. And I would be interested, believe me, I'm separating the fact that fans don't care. They don't want to hear that out of Pat Mahomes' mouth, that they're an underdog. But I wonder this year, more than the past few years? Have they been the underdogs in games more this year overall than the last few years? So factually, he may be right. Public perception, people want to throw something at him.
While we're talking about dynasties and the Chiefs and the Patriots, I've enjoyed Tom Brady post-playing career scratching the itch by just throwing footballs across boardrooms at big speaking events that he's got. I went to Google because yesterday the video started popping up. Tom Brady was at a speaking event in Australia that he was a part of, and in the middle of this gigantic ballroom, he threw a perfect spiral, an absolute dart on the rope to Reece Walsh, an Australian rugby star over there in the middle of this room. And I went to Google Tom Brady throws a football, and the amount of these situations, Tom Brady throws a dart to Delta Airlines CEO at their meeting there. Charlotte, he's found a very interesting way to scratch the itch during what's kind of been like his gap year between school and him starting a job next year, where he's walking in, and I'm very interested to watch Tom Brady's mentality, because he's walking into a room right now where he's watching everybody love up the guy that he's replacing. Greg Olsen has been incredible as the lead analyst for Fox. Tom Brady is walking in, and we know financially, reputation-wise, immediately going to push him out of this job. But Charlotte, you know the kind of competitor this guy is. I'm fascinated to watch what Tom Brady's been up to, because I don't think there's any way this guy has watched everything that's happened in the conversation around Greg Olsen and the guy that he's replacing and taken this in a way that's lying down and not going and doing what he's always done, which is letting the hyper-competitive drive fuel the entire way he lives his life.
Yeah, Tom Brady is an absolute freak. Like, this guy, everybody loving Greg Olsen is probably the best thing that could have happened to Tom Brady's broadcasting career. I was watching, there was a clip on TikTok. Brady went on the Pat McAfee show, and I was watching this clip, And I was like, oh my God, Tom has been practicing talking. Tom has been practicing broadcasting. Tom executed like a perfect backflip 180, whatever, off the diving board on McAfee the other day, because he started out, the question was, does it bother you when Mahomes is compared, when people say he's better than you are? Brady was like, what he does doesn't take away from what I did, and what I did doesn't take away from what he did. And, if someone wants to go out there and win 7 Super Bowls, I'll be cheering for him. And I was like, oh my God, the shade of like still asserting his dominance. And then managed to turn that answer into a plug for all of his companies. And I just think that this is a guy who has been media trained, up the wazoo. Like this guy knows what he's getting into. He has been practicing. Obviously, it's going to take a second, because I think anybody who tries to talk on air for a living, I mean, look, there's still moments where I'm like, oh, my brain just shut off mid-sentence. But he's gonna have a drive, and I think with that drive comes an absolute absurd amount of preparation if you're Tom Brady. And I started to see that, and I for one can't wait. I can't wait to see him back on Sundays, everybody.
I'm kind of all over the place on this one. Tom became, I think, to the public more likable when he went to Tampa Bay. When he was out of New England and how you deal with things in New England, he opened up a little more as the quarterback at Tampa Bay, became a little more out there. He does obviously the pod with Jim Gray and with Larry Fitzgerald as well. So you hear him out there as well. And we knew he was going to, whatever he wanted to have a career in, he was going to be able to have a career in. I'm not going to lie. I come at it a little bit from the other side as a guy who was a 10th rounder, a guy who, was an average player for 9 years. And while given more opportunity than a person not in a sport to get involved in broadcasting and build from there, there's always part of me, because while I've been in this for like 30 years, I have seen time and time and time again, people start to try and do better and better and elevate, and then a star retires and they're handed a job. And then what happens is you're handed the job, and I get it, and we all understand it, but they're handed the job, and then the execs all cross their fingers and they say, man, I hope this works out. Because I have seen over these decades more than a few people who were great players, been handed the top jobs and were awful, and then you move on to the next guy. So there's always part of me that sees a player, and by the way, Greg Olsen, 10 times the player I ever was, don't get me wrong, a great player, but he even recognized as soon as that deal was inked, he was going to be done. He was not going to be, once he was made the top guy at Fox, he wasn't going to be that anymore. So there's always part of me, Mike, as the former 10th rounder, that will say it's, and I'm sure people outside of sports are mad at us athletes who get handed jobs, but then there's another tier of it to how good of a player you were and where you start in the business. So as someone who was on the low end of the draft and a mid player throughout a career, seeing people just get handed jobs, I get why people outside of sports get mad when they see any athlete get handed a job, because it's a little bit of a bummer saying, boy, I like this guy's doing a good job, and for no fault of his own, he's done there.
Yeah, I mean, listen, as a card-carrying Nepo baby, I can certainly understand people having ill feelings towards the way that someone acquired their job. Like, I believe me, I understand that better than most. But I think in this situation, what's interesting about Tom and the way he comes in is, Dad, his background is more like yours than it is like a former first-round pick. Tom Brady's a guy who's used to coming in and having to work that way. And I think what you talk about, the phenomenon that we sometimes see with people that are accomplished in their sport at the Hall of Fame level, is some might approach it with the feeling of, all right, well, I worked so hard at this, so now I don't really need to work as hard at that. There not be the same desire to be great at this thing. And the one thing that at least seems like it works in the favor for Tom Brady is the way that he is wired does not seem to allow him to rest like that, because his career wasn't made because he had extraordinary physical abilities. His career wasn't made because he had a natural proclivity for all this. It was because he had to work tirelessly at the other stuff to get himself to that point. And so at Charlotte, at the very least, coming into this, it doesn't necessarily mean he'll approach it with the same way, but we know at least he's got the wiring in him to approach something like this and that competitive streak to where I'm sure this has been bulletin board material for him. A guy who's made his whole career off feeling slighted probably has looked at a lot of this and thought, all right, you don't think I'm willing to work for this the same way I did for that. We've at the very least, I think, got a shot because of the way he had to go about building his NFL career, not being solely predicated on talent and ability.
Totally. And I think as far as the Greg Olsen portion of it goes, we talked to him earlier this season on the Levitard show. And I was like, how does it feel that like you came out and said, you're the best at this? I admire you saying that. And he was like, look, for me, I'm just going to make it impossible for them to replace me. And I think that I admire his saying that. I also think he probably knew that wasn't going to be the case. But I think what it does mean is that he has a lot of opportunity. Might not be at Fox, but somebody is going to pick this guy up. He is not going to be sidelined, as it were. And I also think that in terms of Brady's career, this was probably the best thing that could happen for him in broadcasting, because I think a lot of people do not realize that you have to practice talking. You have to practice figuring out how to call a game. You have to know what's interesting. You have to know your statistics. You have to know what has happened before. If anybody knows that off the top of his head, given how long he was in the league, it's probably Tom Brady. But Brady has also seemed to realize he took a year off. He didn't jump into this. He was like, there is skill involved in this in a way that he needs to learn. And if anybody can learn anything, it's definitely him. So I completely feel you. I love Greg Olsen. I wish he could keep that top job. I just feel like he is going to end up with a top job somewhere else because this guy is too good at what he does.
He very well could, but it's just the fact of, again, getting big-footed, and which is what happens. Again, we all know it's going to happen. And listen, if we're to sit there and if on DraftKings Sportsbook they actually had odds of if Tom Brady is going to be good at this or not, I would bet he would be, right? For all the reasons we talked about. But still, at the end of the day, we don't know. Because, Charlotte, like you mentioned, all the things you need to know, and then you need to learn to talk in the cadence of a booth as well. I think he'll succeed, but we don't know. And what I see is, unfortunately, someone who's never done it replace someone who is at the top of their game right now. So that's kind of a bummer for me for Greg. But overall, I definitely feel Tom is going to be really good at this.
Someone else at the top of their game, Charlotte Wilder with Oddball and Nino Haston every day but Monday here on the DraftKings Network. Check them out over there. Download, subscribe, rate, review. Thanks, Charlotte.
Thank you, guys.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Guys, earlier in the show, we were talking about the explosion of offense in the NBA, and that was certainly true for LeBron and the Lakers when they gave up a ton of points on Tuesday night, 138 to the Hawks in their loss. This dropped LA to below 500 this season at 24-25, and this is a concerning pattern for LA, guys. They've given up at least 127 points for the fifth straight game. They rank 19th in the NBA in points allowed, allowing 117.2 points per game to opponents. Now, guys, trade deadline coming up on Thursday, February 8th. Changes expected for this Lakers team given their struggles and everything that's been going on. Not fueled by LeBron with some cryptic tweets post-game last night, just posting the hourglass emoji, like whose time is ticking? I don't know. The guys are standing by with a special guest who can hopefully make sense of all this.
Yes, very excited to welcome back Tom Haberstroh, Blazers Analytics Insider. You can check out all of his great work at thefinder.com, on Twitter at Tom Haberstroh. And Tom, as someone who works in basketball, do your eyes just light up every time LeBron James starts going off and cryptically tweeting in the month of January? Because it feels like a yearly rite of passage for something weird that's about to happen.
For sure. Remember the don't fit in, fit out tweet with Kevin Love? I mean, it was the most cryptic thing ever, and he denied that it meant anything. And then, of course, years later, we find out that he was absolutely calling out his teammates. This is just, I'm going to miss this more than anything, maybe, when LeBron James retires, is the cryptic tweets that was just a mainstay of Basketball Illuminati, our podcast at Metalark, where it was like every time he tweets, there's always a coded message. And so for this, I'm interpreting this as his time's running out and he's realizing maybe the coach's time is running out and he wants to have maybe a change at the coaching position. That's my read, because as you said at the top, the defense has been atrocious. And as we know in basketball, the first thing to sell out when you've tuned out the coach is defense. That is a canary in the coal mine when you have tuned out the head coach, is you're not playing together defensively and the locker room isn't together. To me, that's the biggest indication that they need to make a change at the coaching position. Not just that they gave up so many points, but because LeBron James is tweeting cryptically.
So we sit there, let's talk about two teams for a second. Obviously, everybody talks about the Lakers because of LeBron. Can he get the team back there, at the age he's at? We just, as he even said, when they lost to Atlanta last night, a team who had been floundering as well, I think lost 4 of their last 5 and were 8 games under 500. He said, any given night we can beat any team in the NBA, and any given night we can get our ass kicked by any team in the NBA. And he said that's what happens when you're 500. So we just saw a classic Saturday night, Golden State and the Lakers, and LeBron James and Steph Curry, and what they did in 2 overtimes. But that was from the 9th and 12th teams in the conference. So right out of the gate, when we're getting to the end of the season and playoff time, is there any way either one of these teams can make themselves relevant in the playoffs?
Hey, I'll throw this one at you. What if the Golden State Warriors trade for LeBron James?
God, yes. Please, God, give me this gift.
I mean, think about it, right? Because if you look at LeBron, Brian Windhorst at ESPN just reported this week his opinion that he's not sure if LeBron James is going to be with the Lakers next season, which would indicate that he's either going to pack up with his player option and move somewhere else, or he's going to look for a trade. And we know that the Golden State Warriors have 3 really good young players who are maybe not ready to go and chase a championship in Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga, and Brandon Podziemski. What if the Lakers were just like, okay, LeBron, if you're done with this whole thing, then we'll just move you. Where do you want to go? And he might say, I want to link up with my guy, Draymond Green and Stephen Curry in Golden State. And Golden State has young pieces that the Los Angeles Lakers, if they're going for a rebuild or going for, guys who fit next to Anthony Davis, that might be something that they revisit, is the idea of LeBron James going to Golden State. And that would be an amazing story for the NBA, but also for the Warriors, who are trying to figure out a way to get another creator, another guy with a high IQ to step in with those young players and get rid of this 2 timeline thing that Joe Lacob has insisted on, and instead would shift back into 1 timeline. And finally, we would have the 2 kids from Akron, Stephen Curry and LeBron James, on the same team.
Tom, I've been waiting for this. The All-Star Game flirtation over the years between LeBron James and Steph Curry has been one of my favorite things to watch. It went from back in the day, the footage of him gassing Steph up before he was Steph, to all the smiling and laughing out there on the court, the high-fiving. It looked like a Rocky Beach montage. So this would be the perfect culmination of that finally coming to fruition. And would also finally give us, I mean, especially in the Lakers iterations of LeBron James, him being able to space the floor, not just with shooters, but with the greatest shooter of all time, as potentially like an interesting fit. Like, does he fit what that team has traditionally been? What does it look like meshing what's been this free-flowing style of Warriors basketball and LeBron James, who's often been an offense into of himself?
Yeah, I think he would be a good fit. I mean, when you talk about Steve Kerr's offense, it's predicated on reads and ball movement. They have one of the slowest pace ratings in the NBA, so they're not necessarily going up and down in a track meet, which fits LeBron James' style right now. He does not want to have to run at this age. And I think what Steve Kerr has harped on is he wants Jonathan Kuminga and the rest of the rotation to, and Jordan Poole didn't meet this standard. They want high IQ players who can read each other, play for each other. LeBron James is the highest IQ player maybe ever to step foot on a basketball court. He has an encyclopedic memory. He's a guy who can play almost blindfolded out there, know where his teammates are. So in terms of the ability to play in that system offensively, I think there's no question about it. He can fit into the Warriors system. It's defensively, I think they need another big man who can protect the rim. Draymond Green getting up there in age. Kevon Looney has aged faster than any big man I can remember. I think they do need another big man. But LeBron James, thinking about that 5-man closing lineup of Clay, Steph, Draymond, and insert whomever you want there in the fifth slot. It doesn't matter. That is going to be an outstanding closing unit, and just the basketball would be a virtuoso every night.
So we were talking earlier about Tom scoring in the NBA and how much it's up. And I've talked about this comparatively to the NFL, where rules were changed more against the defense for the offense to make it more exciting. Where are we on the line of it being too much offense? Not so far as an NBA All-Star game, which becomes unwatchable, much like the NFL Pro Bowl, because nobody hitting it was just 7-on-7 until they changed those rules. Where are we with, is it too much scoring to no, we're at a good spot?
So we are having the most scoring per game in the NBA since the 60s, since the early 60s. And I've written on TomTheFinder.com that this is not the juiced era of basketball. That was the juiced era of basketball. In 1962, when Wilt Chamberlain scored 100 points in a game and averaged 50 for a season, and Oscar Robertson averaged a triple-double, there was 130 possessions per game in that era. They shot 41% on twos. Today, they shoot 55% on twos. They just went up and down, shot their first shot within the first few seconds, and then went back on defense. There was nothing compared to what we're dealing with now. That was just insane basketball, and you saw a huge hyperinflation in scoring numbers. And if we're going to hold the Wilt Chamberlain record of 100 points in as a legitimate record, then these scoring nights that we're seeing, they're absolutely legitimate. And the reason why we have so many scoring nights, high scoring nights, is because of the pace. We're averaging 100 possessions per game right now, which in the early 90s or in the 90s, early 2000s, it was at like 90 possessions. So we're having 10 more possessions per game. And compared to the 60s, this is slow basketball. It's almost like imagine in football if they played with 5 downs instead of 4 downs. That's what we're talking here. Is in baseball, if they played 12 innings or 10 innings instead of 9 innings. That's what's happening in today's NBA, where they're just getting more possessions and more opportunities to add to their scoring totals. And also the three-point shot, Mike, like the idea of, yes, the pace is higher, but also the three-point shot has not only increased the scoring because 3 is more than 2, but the added effect of spacing, the geometry of spacing out, creates more driving lanes and more ability for a guy to be on an island, defending Kevin Durant on an island because there's no one behind him. It's a 5-out system. I'm having to guard Luka Doncic by myself, whereas in the 90s, there'd be guys stacked behind you and in the paint. That's no longer the case. So defense is so much harder to play now, and we're seeing a lot more 50 burgers than we did 10 years ago. Put it this way. The Golden State Warriors in 2016, or sorry, 2017, when Kevin Durant was on the squad, they finished with the best offensive rating in the NBA that season. That same offensive rating would finish 28th today. Kevin Durant, Golden State Warriors, peak basketball that we can remember, the Charlotte Hornets are scoring at that rate right now. So that's how quickly things have changed. The spacing, the three-point shot, the pace has gone up. But I still think if we're going to hold Will Chamberlain's record as legitimate, these numbers are not out of the norm.
I'm glad you brought up Will's record, Tom. I wanted to run this by you. You mentioned your basketball Illuminati background here. I'm thinking about becoming a Will Chamberlain 100-point game truther. Just because we've got video of so much now, we somehow don't have footage of this. Walk me through, is this a decision that I should make right now? Potentially, because I don't want to do too much conspiracy theory stuff. We see how far that can go with like the Aaron Rodgers of the world. But I figured this could be a good lane for me to start to become a Wilt Chamberlain 100-point game truther.
Yeah, I'm waiting for someone to be like, hey, we found the video, and it turns out the NBA just like came up with like an AI deep fake video of Wilt Chamberlain, and we're just truth squatting that. I think we're not too far away from that. But I do think that it's interesting that like we have this conversation about the legitimacy of today's 50 burgers and 60 burgers. By the way, wait a minute, time out. This is the perfect forum to discuss this. Do you guys know the origin of 50 burger?
No. I was just, as I heard you saying it, it was starting to register again. I was like, why do we use burger as the operative term for large scoring outputs?
So I did some digging on this. Apparently it's because of Dick Butkus. Okay. The legendary Dick Butkus once said that he would eat a burger for every point that the opponent scored against him. And then apparently the opposing team scored 50 points, and there was like a whole thing about him having to eat 50 burgers about it.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Yeah. Like,
okay, this is the most important news I have heard this entire week, Tom.
Yes.
So you mean to tell me we have that phrase now because at one point people were worried that Dick Butkus was going to have to eat 50 literal burgers after a really bad game.
Yes, and I don't know if there's any other possible reason. You know, like no one's eating 50 burgers. It's not like you're going to McDonald's and let me get the 50-piece burger. No, I get it when people are like, yeah. I'll have the, like Kendrick Perkins likes to say, oh, he had 30 points. He had a 30-piece nugget last night. That makes sense to me. We've all sat down at 11 o'clock at night and been like, I'll have 30 pieces of those chicken McNuggets, right? 50 burgers, though, there has to be an origin story here that revolves around a guy like Dick Butkus, and apparently I've done some research on this. That is the origin story that I think there might be. Forget Wilt's 100, guys. I think we need film of Dick Butkus trying to eat 50 burgers in one sitting.
Was Dick Butkus the original major league eater? This is in this essay, Dick Butkus invented major league eating.
Without even knowing it, he did that because eating 50 burgers, I got to believe, in one sitting is harder than scoring 100 points in an NBA game. That's just me. We will see. That's an incredible story that Tom, I'm not going to lie. At some point, we're going to steal from you and we're not going to credit you for it. That's just kind of the way Mike and I are. So I apologize up front for that.
Wow, by the way, Joey Chestnut owns the world record for eating 103 Crystal Burgers in 8 minutes back in 2007. So it is possible to eat 50 burgers in a sitting. I'd assume Crystal Burgers are a little bit smaller.
Yeah, I was going to say,
yes.
This has to be the best place to discuss this. What is the inflation rate of Crystal Burgers versus, say, a quarter pounder with cheese?
Well,
so
I mean,
Crystal
it's obviously
Burgers
huge,
appear
right?
to look like White Castle burgers. I think they're like the little smaller squared off ones, so more of a White Castle size.
So what is the equivalent? Is 103 Crystal Burgers, White Castle burgers equivalent to 70?
Let me tell you. It puts Dick Butkus in the category, right? I still think, obviously, the eaters of today could eat more than 50 in a sitting. But let me tell you, you talk back in the day of him eating 50 in a sitting, that's going to be some pure amazement right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So again, we have even more homework here right now. I'd imagine TomTheFinder.com is going to be all over this one. Tom, in the meantime, while we've got you for a couple more minutes here on the basketball front, would be remiss. Last night, big moment for the NBA as we had the 76ers and the Warriors playing. Joel Embiid goes down tweaking a knee injury at the very end of that game. How bad is this? Not just now, but long term. Joel was coming back after missing some time with an injury this year. There's been so much of the conversation about his MVP candidacy and the 65-game rule because of the amount of time that he's missed. How worrisome is this?
Very much so. Although I will point out it was the other knee, or unrelated to his previous knee injury, because this was a contact, boom, Kuminga falling on it. But this is what sports scientists and medical folks in the NBA, when the 65-game rule came out and the player participation policy came out, that would punish players for missing games due to rest or load management or skipping games in the schedule. Their point is, not only are you trying to make sure guys are ready for the postseason and the championship run and extending their careers, but when they miss a game, they have zero chance for injury. This Joel Embiid game, he didn't look good. He looked like he was rusty. He admitted as much, that he was not up to himself. And if he had rested that game, there is a 0% chance that Jonathan Kuminga falls on his knee, which is a big reason why NBA players, when they're trying to win a championship, they have to keep that calculus in their head. Is, if I go out there, it might not even be that I re-aggravate my hamstring injury like Tyrese Halliburton did when he came back too early from that, trying to get to 65 games. It might be that, hey, freak things happen. And so they oftentimes will point to the fact that they go from, maybe I have a 1% chance of having an injury, to 0, and that is worth something. So Joel Embiid, if he misses a lot of time due to this injury, it'd be a real shame. And it would get me to the point where I think the national conversation would be, we need to get rid of this 65-game rule. We need to get rid of it. It doesn't make sense. You can already voters already keep in mind the player game total when they're deciding these awards. If a player plays 64 games or 65, they're already incorporating that into their voting ballot. We don't need some sort of rule to artificially bring in some sort of bar to be entered into this competition. I think it's something we're going to have to tweak, or maybe possibly get rid of going forward, because I think it disincentivizes the right thing. I think it disincentivizes players treating their injuries with a long-term view of their postseason. We talk about big playoff and rings, and yet when we prioritize that, then it's a problem. I think players should want to play every game, but not come back early and put themselves at undue risk for injury.
He also tweaked an ankle last night, did Embiid, and a big man with lower body injuries are tough, and they're 3-9 without him on the court. Tom, only about a minute to go. How much does Doc Rivers help the defense of the Milwaukee Bucks?
Well, at the very least, he's going to have a plan, right? Like, that was the biggest thing from Adrian Griffin, was they wanted to have a plan. They wanted to have an idea of what to do, and they had a very successful X's and O's on that end of the floor of playing drop coverage and having Brook Lopez own the paint, or Giannis own the paint area in pick and rolls. Then they tried to go and blitz those pick and rolls early in the season. Did not work, and they were scrambling on that end of the floor. Doc Rivers knows what he wants to do. Adrian Griffin, as a first-time head coach, did not have the best idea, or at least the buy-in of what he wanted to do, and then he lost a lot of the locker room at that point when he had to switch up. Keep in mind, Damian Lillard, not on the team when he got the job, Adrian Griffin. So he had to kind of throw things against the wall and try to reshape that defense. And I think that's why he ended up not being there for the long haul. And Doc Rivers coming in, at the very least, is going to help defensively. And I got to tell you, we got to get rid of, I know we're running out of time, got to get rid of the whole he blew 3-3-1 leads. It is a ludicrous stigma attached to Doc Rivers, and we need to just get rid of that in the NBA conversation.
Wow. All right. Taking a meme out of the most rich meme culture in sports in the NBA. Tom Haberstroh, this is more of what you can get at TomTheFinder.com. He's the reason that at 6:19 Pacific, I am wanting to order burgers right now coming off this. Tom, we always appreciate the time and the insight, man. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Tom.
How am I going to
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Guys, listen up because this is important, okay? The big game is coming up, and VSiN has a free downloadable betting guide that you need to get your hands on. It features the expert handicappers and analysts from VSiN. It includes key Super Bowl betting trends, historical analysis, tips, prop betting strategies, everything you need to be ready for the big game. Just go to vsin.com/DKN to download your free guide today. All right, guys, speaking of the NFL and the big game, obviously only 2 teams playing in that one. So the 30 other fan bases already locked in on the offseason. This week on ESPN, Matt Bowen released his top 10 free agents that people should be keeping their eyes on, okay? So some big names on here. Chris Jones from the Chiefs. Guys, when you're looking at this top 10, is there anybody that you think should be higher, or does this seem like it's relatively on point for you?
No, I think it's what you'd expect out of this. I was surprised, Dad, as we've been so, locked into the flow of the season, seeing some of the names that have popped up here and remembering now who's going to be available. There's some incredible talent on this list, especially defensively with Justin Madubuike, who we just saw his season end with the Baltimore Ravens, had a career year and a contract year. Christian Wilkins, who's been so great and a part of a couple different Miami Dolphins defenses there. Danielle Hunter, Brian Burns. Like, you've got a lot of talent defensively that you're going to be able to work with here, in addition to quarterback-wise, since we know that's what everyone cares about. Kirk Cousins as a fascinating centerpiece to this conversation, given the fact that he's coming off injury, given the fact that he's been a guy that's been much maligned as having a ceiling in the postseason, despite usually putting up consistently great numbers when he's under center for you.
Listen, I love the fact that out of the 10 we just listed, 6 are defensive line, either ends, tackles, or edge guys. I think that's fantastic. And the money that's going to have to go out, there are projections out there that we know the salaries of what some of these guys made. The biggest jump, Madubuike, and what he did, he's coming off the last year of his 4-year rookie deal. And Baltimore, I talked about this earlier on the show, Baltimore actually offered him a contract extension during during training camp that he turned down. He basically said, I'm going to bet on myself. And he bet on himself to the tune of 13.5 sacks from the defensive interior position. Projections out there now for at least 3 of them, Madubuike, Christian Wilkins, and Brian Burns, are all that their value is in the area of $20 million a year. And you don't think Chris Jones is going to get something like that? And Josh Allen, he had 17.5 sacks last year. Danielle Hunter had 16.5 sacks last year. So there's a lot of sacks that were out there this year for guys, that are now looking for paydays. And we'll see if franchise tags come into play and all that as well. But you're looking at some guys, some defensive line guys who, and we always talk about the big money. So obviously starts with quarterback. Then you talk about a left tackle on offense. You talk about a cornerback on defense and an edge rusher. But now you're getting some of these D tackles that are, doing great things. Now, Chris Jones goes out and rushes over the end as well. We'll see him do that in the Super Bowl. But you're getting some good stuff. It used to be Aaron Donald was the talk of the interior of the line, right? Then you started to add some names into there of guys who are playing well. But this year, between Wilkins and Madubuike, and Chris Jones, who, and others, that D tackle position has been turning into a pretty prime position as well.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting watching what happens down the middle of the field with a lot of positions. You've heard a lot of people, we've talked to Mina Kimes before on this show about how off-ball linebacker, something that we've seen an incredibly high level of play of during the postseason, is going to become extremely valuable. And you start to look down this list of free agents, Dad. We're talking about names like Patrick Queen in Baltimore, Frankie Louvu for the Carolina Panthers here. There's not necessarily a huge chest of big names at that position as you wonder, all right, are people going to start reaching more in the draft for stuff like that? Because as we see a league where so many of these Shanahan-McVay offenses are trying to attack the middle of the field, there's such competent tight end play across the board. You need guys like that. You need, it's hard to say a Kyle Hamilton type because there aren't many people that meet the physical profile that he does, but you're starting to see once again that emphasis placed on the middle of the field in a way that there's just not a lot of in the market right now.
Yeah, I love up the middle, like you said, with Roquan making $20 million. You know who's going to be an interesting one, Mike, is our Notre Dame guy, Kyle Hamilton. I mean, he's a guy, a couple years in the league. Remember when he ran the 4.640, before the draft, everyone was like, oh my God, what are you going to do with this guy? And it took him a little bit to find the position for him. But you want to talk about an up the middle guy, whether it's at safety, he can play like a linebacker, or he's up on the line as well. And we're talking safeties making in the area of 18, 19 mil, the top guys. He's a guy that's going to bust that one. So it is interesting to look forward to, because you're right. We always do talk about up the gut, interior linemen, middle linebackers, and safeties on their value. And we have seen that safety position, I think, maybe more than any other position outside of when I played, these edge rushers were tweeners and didn't make the game. Right? They were too big for linebacker, too small for D-line. Now they're the edge rushers, that are making a ton of money. I think one of the other big changes in the NFL has been what you're expecting out of the safety position, especially when a guy like Derwin James came into the league and what he could do. So those are the positions. And now you're seeing not just the Aaron Donalds of the world on the interior of that D-line. We're finding their worth. It's not always associated with sacks. A lot of times stuff they do won't even show up in the box score, but teams and management sees those and sees the effect they can have on a game.
Yeah, I do wonder if we're going to have free agents that are able to take pressure stats to the table now when they're negotiating and say, hey, listen, everybody who understands real football understands the value of this. Let's start to make that a monetary thing as well, because I think you're absolutely right with the effect overall for that. And I look at this board right here, Dad, I'm not going to lie, the first team that I thought of was the Dallas Cowboys. Like, we know financially their house is not in order right now. They've got all the stuff they need to work out with Dak Prescott. But you look at a lot of the defensive names that are on this chart right now, and I look further down the list because I don't think, based on their current situation, they're going to be able to afford guys like Justin Madubuike or Christian Wilkins in that. But could you afford a Leonard Williams, who's going to be a free agent after his time with the Seattle Seahawks? Is there someone like that you can bring in for this one very clear need you have right now as the rush defense up front? I think there's going to be a lot of teams like them that look at this postseason. And what have we seen throughout the entirety of this NFL postseason? After years of being told this is an 11 personnel league, this is a pace and space league, we're going to spread it out and go wide open and sling the ball all over the yard, we've seen, all right, defenses are going to play a ton of too high now. They're going to keep a bunch of guys back and take away big plays. You mentioned the premium paid on safety is because now you got to come down and fill from a lot further away because you're trying to take away these big plays. But offensively, it's been okay. We're going to batten down the hatches. The Buffalo Bills made the runoff being able to run. The Chiefs have tightened down into a multiple tight end group. The San Francisco 49ers and the Miami Dolphins run as much or more base personnel as anybody in the NFL. All of it's constricted back down here now. And so I do wonder if, hey, we've seen rushing the ball and being able to stop the rush have been the most important factors in the postseason. Once again, after all this offensive revolution, how is that reflected in the dollars and cents that are spent in the free agent market for a lot of teams to try and address what was clear deficiencies for some of these groups that showed up and absolutely bit them in the ass when it came to the postseason?
And right as of last week, here are the teams: 49ers, Seahawks, Steelers, Browns, Cowboys, Broncos, Bills, Chargers, Dolphins, Saints, all over the cap. So you have to be in the cap by the start of the new year. So all these free agents that we're looking at right now, we have to, if teams that are over the cap or close to being over, have to find space. That's when you're going to see restructured contracts or extensions. Look squarely at like a Dak Prescott, right? For the Cowboys, who last week were about $20 million over the cap. He could get rid of that in a heartbeat, with an extension. So that's interesting things to look at as we see these players who are all going to be looking for big money, what teams have to do to be in position to get one of these. By the way, the furthest over the cap right now, the Saints, as of last week, $83 million over the cap. Have fun with that.
Yeah, the New Orleans, famously the authors of the idea that the salary cap isn't real, finding out that, in fact, it might be very real and it might crush them to death. Dad, they're very fond of the phrase, the draft starts in Mobile down at the Senior Bowl group. But I will say it is fun for me when we get to this time of year in draft season to watch a lot of the NFL people, whether that's the scouts and people that are actually making their living off trying to get these young guys to come play for them, or the people that cover the NFL, in watching them meet our sweet college boys as they make that jump to the next level. Did you see all the highlights of Ladd McConkey just cooking people in one-on-ones at the Senior Bowl yesterday?
Oh, yeah. I do like what, and listen, the Senior Bowl is all about the practice during the week. I mean, that's, quite honestly, I think most of the scouts leave after the practice and don't even stay for the game. They'll just watch tape of the game or something. The practices there, man, guys are just laying it on the line. And that's when sometimes a name we know shows what they can do. And other times that's when you find guys that you didn't know, maybe from smaller schools that you didn't see play or didn't hear of. All of a sudden they're playing against Power 5 players and they're putting on a show. And that's when you see some stock rise. And that's what I like. Again, you're in pads. You're doing something at least on the field to show. And this is, because that's always the biggest question, especially with smaller school guys. Well, how are you going to do against, Power 5 competition? And then how are you going to do against NFL players? And when they show that in practice or in the game that they can play well against those, I really like how it jumps their stock.
Yeah, it's huge for those guys. It's, I think, the biggest opportunity for them because of what you mentioned, the lack of consistent high-end competition. Most scouts will go to the games they played against Power 5 opponents and stuff like that. But even the obvious stuff isn't always as obvious. Like Ladd McConkey is going to be the NFL's Pat Connaughton, where if you don't read the scouting report, bad things are going to happen to you because this dude has been remixing some of the best athletes on the planet in the best conference in college football for the last however many years, and yet people are still oohing and eyeing. And I already saw we're getting the lazy comp to Cooper Kupp because God forbid we compare a wide receiver to someone who's got different skin tone than he does there. So yeah. I will challenge everyone this draft season to find a non-white draft comp for Ladd McConkey because he's going to be someone that gets talked about because he is a very compelling player. The other one that made me laugh, Dad, was Joe Milton, former quarterback of the Tennessee Vols, who showed up at Senior Bowl practice. And I saw what's been a staple of college football for all of his time in it, which is every offseason, us getting sexed up by the arm strength again. Everyone talking about the absolute cannon he's got attached to his shoulder. I saw the video of the orange that he threw at practice like 80 yards come up again right now. It is a tried and true staple, and he is going to be the ultimate example, Dad, of he's arm candy. Someone in the NFL is going to look and say, yeah, Josh Heupel, Tennessee, Michigan, and Jim Harbaugh. You guys couldn't get it out of Joe Milton, but I can get something out of all that talent right now. Yeah. He is the prototype that the NFL looks for, that they think they know better than everybody else is better. And I hope it for him. Joe seems like a nice kid. He's insanely talented. I would love nothing more than to watch that dude hit and somehow have a Hall of Fame career, despite what we've seen at the college level so far.
Listen, we always root for the player, but we are analysts, going over things. I hope the guy does great with whatever he does. But this is kind of the other side of it. You don't see the production in actual games, and then he goes against, talent, top talent at the Senior Bowl, and he's airing it out, and it looks great. That, to me, would not mean a whole lot. Completely reverse of a small school guy who you weren't sure of his competition coming to these practices and showing out. Joe Milton showing out at these practices really doesn't do anything for me because he had chances against top-tier talent in college, and it didn't really happen. We'll continue to say, I hope he makes it. I hope he has a great career, but it's our job to analyze it, and I'm not getting lost in the sauce on that one to say, wow, look at what he's doing here when he had plenty of chances to do it out there against, top competition, and it wasn't happening.
No, but it's going to be fun to watch that for other people because Lord knows I put on my clown mask every offseason in college football and looked longingly at that arm and said something's about to happen. But speaking of something about to happen, let's talk about his alma mater, Jesse, as Tennessee once again in the center of the NCAA crosshairs.
Got a good old-fashioned NCAA violation investigation going on. Gather up the horses, fellas. So they are under investigation for violations related to name, image, and likeness. Now, this puts the Volunteers in the crosshairs here for potential sanctions as repeat violators. As we know, they're fresh off that NCAA ruling in 2023. They were charged with 18 level 1 violations, fined a record $8 million. So per the New York Times, guys, one of the allegations at the center of this investigation centers around a collective's payment for a PJ flight for the Tennessee quarterback. Really? I mean, sometimes you read about these NCAA violations and you're like, this seems so innocuous. Like, why would you try to get somebody in trouble for this? And then you read some of them where you're like, why are we flying recruits on PJs?
Well, it's where we've arrived at in college football. And that's the interesting part about all this one, because Tennessee's coming off of those other sanctions, like you mentioned, that happened under Jeremy Pruitt. And those were the subject of a lot of jokes. Remember, it was people talking about him handing recruits money in McDonald's and Chick-fil-A bags. Jeremy Pruitt telling investigators that part of the reason he was doling out this money was because he felt personal guilt about the social reckoning that was going on in the country at that time. All of that was remnants of the old era. What their defense essentially for now is the old Dave Chappelle comedy line, sorry, officer, I didn't know I couldn't do that. They're basically trying to look at the NCAA data and say, we don't know how it's possible that we're supposed to know what we can and can't do based on how you keep changing the rules, because all of this right now, as the NCAA we've seen, is starting to try and crack down on name, image, and likeness. Goes back to the central thesis of what they put out as the guidelines to begin with, which is, hey, we understand this is going to happen. You just can't use it to entice recruits. And the brass of Tennessee saying that's stupid is, I think, a defensible format here for them to try and go. But them saying we didn't know what we couldn't do, that's been spelled out very clearly from day one since the NCAA put out its first guidelines, is you can't use this to entice recruits. So when all of a sudden they start trying to enforce it, they're not technically wrong about what they're trying to enforce, even if I think it's the dumbest thing on earth.
So, and I agree with you, the NCAA made this rule, but then they weren't really enforcing it. And then I don't know if a light switch flipped in the office or something, but then they decided to start enforcing it. And I think all of us colleges were like, oh, wait a minute, you weren't really enforcing it, now you're enforcing it. And by rule, you're right, they can enforce it, and it's always revolving around NIL collectives. This one, the Spire Sports Group, which is Tennessee's primary NIL collective. Basically, what we have going on is, before all of this, you gave a under-the-table bag of money to an 18-year-old to come to your school, or while that player was with the school, you gave him a bag of money while he was there to stay there, and that was promised to him when he got there that he would be paid during his duration there. Now, under these new rules, basically that bag of money goes on top of the table for the players that are already in college. Now, here you go. Take the money. Here's the money for you. But still, it is not allowed to be on top of the table for the 18-year-old being recruited by the school. So the NCAA is trying dearly as you climb the rope in gym school and trying to make it to the top of the rope and you start sliding down and burn your hands. The NCAA is trying to hang on to that last bit of amateurism by saying you can't entice the 18-year-old to come to your school, and if you do, we're going to nail you, and that's where the Tennessee is going to get nailed for.
ESPN obtained a document where the Tennessee Chancellor, Don DePlowman, dishonest for the NCAA to issue guidelines that say third-party collectives can meet with prospective student athletes, discuss NIL, and even enter into a contract with prospective student athletes, but at the same time say that collective can engage in conversations that would be of a recruiting nature. Any discussion about NIL might factor into a prospective student's decision to attend the institution. They are absolutely right about that. And I think that's what's at the crux of it, Dad, is the system has already decided this is the way it's working. The NCAA can continue to try and turn a blind eye to this, act like it's not happening, enforce sporadically when it sees the opportunity to do so, or it can do what got it in the position to begin with this time around and accept reality and start to govern accordingly. This is the system the sport is operating under. And until you get to a point where these athletes are actually employees and we get what most coaches want now, which is a lot more control over the situation by bringing it in-house, it would benefit them and I think everyone else to finally accept the reality of the situation instead of continuing to kick the can down the road and just act like things have been the way they've always been when that's the furthest thing from the truth. All right, guys, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you off into the rest of your day. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and try and check us out here live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network whenever you can. If you miss us or any of our great guests, shout out to our buddy Charlotte Wilder from the Oddball podcast here. Shout out to our friend Tom Haberstroh, NBA analyst over at TomTheFinder.com for joining us today and making us smarter. If you missed that, check it out wherever you get our podcast, their podcast, or right here on the DraftKings YouTube channel when we get done with the show. All live out in the Super Bowl at Radio Row in Las Vegas. And we are also going to be live at a different time on the DraftKings Network. We will be airing live from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern all next week, Monday through Friday. The best of GoJo and Golic is going to air from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern in the spot that we're normally on here. So it's a 1-week change. We got some different logistical challenges out in Vegas next week. Don't want to catch anyone off guard. So again, we will start at 4 o'clock Eastern live every day just for next week. Dad, in the meantime, let's get to this. And let's start off with food innovation. Now, as anyone who's followed us for a while, who's followed me on Twitter at Mike Golic Jr. for a while, big fan of food and snack brands continuing to find ways to make it new and exciting. And Oreo put out a couple of interesting teasers here. I saw a potential teaser where it looked like a commercial for with Kris Jenner and the Kardashians for the Super Bowl, but also saw this, Dad, not too long ago. One small step for man, one giant leap for cooking kind. Oreo is coming out with the Space Dunk that landed on shelves a couple of days ago. I have not been able to track this down yet, but Dad, much like Stu Gott's claiming he can taste the difference in the colors of Fruit Loops, I don't know if I'm ready to go so far as to say I could taste the difference in all the different color Oreos, but the Halloween orange Oreos, the minty green Oreos, and all the different iterations over the years do, in my opinion, lend something different to the experience. So I'm excited to try these very pink and blue Space Dunk Oreos.
I am as well, and I hope with the pink and blue, I hope it's double stuffed. I mean, because the thin Oreos, I want no part of, right? I want double stuff or nothing for me. So I'm hoping it's double stuff. I will try anything. And here is my, I don't think I ask much. So we are going to be the week at the Super Bowl with DraftKings, going to have a great setup there by Radio Row. And one of the things all the places have when you set stuff up is you have a snack area, right? And we had a snack area last year at the Super Bowl in Arizona. That's my only ask. I'd like some of these Oreos in our snack area for next week. That's what I would like. These new Oreos, I'd like these to be in our snack area. I know it'll mess with our teeth, the Oreos. I get all that.
Sure.
Just have to make sure we drink something to keep our mouth. You know, we Mike, you and I are experienced enough with Oreo eating to be able to make it through that. I think we'll be just fine there. So that's my one ask. Have those Space Oreos on our snack table at DraftKings at the Super Bowl.
This is like your rider. The Space Dunk Oreos are on your rider.
Boom.
Now, as with any snack conversation, and I agree with you, Dad, I hope if we're not going to get these, we need the most stuff Oreos, the ones that have just completely abused cream to the point of no return that I love, that I think should be the standard going forward. But with any snack consideration, we need to always ask the question, Jesse, have you had Oreos?
Yes, I've had Oreos. I mean, it's been years.
Oh, thank you.
It's been years. But
don't act like that was an off the wall question. Jesse, I mean, you have not tried a lot of things that we are somewhat stunned by.
You're not wrong. So I have had Oreos. It has been a long time since I've had an Oreo, but I have had Oreos and I like them. They taste good.
All right, so I'm relieved to hear that as your friend and coworker that this is still something that's been a part of your life. So we're going to try and continue to make it part of ours. We'll report back. We'll give you guys a full breakdown if and when this happens at Radio Row. Hell, maybe even for the right price. Oreo people, call us. This could happen on air. Boom. In the meantime, Jesse, let's talk about something that we pray to God doesn't happen on air. The new Dune movie is set to come out, and there is an interesting wrinkle, we'll call it, to the theater experience with Dune in their popcorn bucket.
Yeah, this is a story that I've been really just hammering home and making sure that we will get this on the show. So if anyone's wondering why it's in this, that, and the third, it's because of me. So Dune Part 2 is going viral like a month before it's even been released for reasons that have nothing to do with the movie and everything to do with the special edition popcorn cup that is being offered. I can't talk about this with a straight face. So the lid is a replica of the sandworm. You know, the creature from Arrakis. It's a big part. I don't know if you guys have seen Dune, but it's this. That's the sandworm.
Yeah.
And
please pull back from that shot. For the love of God, we are way too close to the opening.
So that's the sandworm's mouth. So that's on the top of the, bucket. So you would stick your hand right down there in the middle to grab your popcorn. And it's gone viral on social media for people suggesting something that's not suitable for work that you could do with this popcorn bucket.
Jesse, can you explain to us why you wanted to do this story? Can you go ahead and fill us in?
Yeah, because I have a sense of humor of a 12-year-old boy, and I think it's pretty funny that this is being compared to a sex toy. Let's just call it like it is.
I was just going to say, the fact that we have to say Jesse is correct, and you're only supposed to stick your arm in there. You're only supposed to put your hand through that. Not anything else.
See,
you sick monster.
See, here's the worst.
I already know.
We are now going to find out the worst part of the internet when these are out with some of the pictures we're going to get, right?
Yeah, somebody needs to tell Elmo about this.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
No, you know what? We can't put this. Don't
bring Elmo into this.
I mean, well, Dad, I don't want to hear it from you yesterday denying Elmo's reality here. You're an Elmo denier. You sat up here and like that guy in the Bible who denied Jesus 3 times, you denied Elmo on a national stage. So you don't get to come to his defense now. Me and Jesse will take care of Elmo.
Poor
you worry about your
Elmo.
real in your reality in your world.
Wrongly crucified for that. I believe in Elmo the puppet. All I said is I'm not really into Elmo asking me, any philosophical questions. I love Elmo in Elmo's role.
It wasn't philosophy.
Outside of Elmo's role.
You were doing. It was common human decency that you wanted to deny him.
Because we all know it's not so much Elmo, it's the people out there. You knew what they were going to do with some of those answers. And everybody knew it. And I almost said even Elmo knew it. Oh, my God.
Yeah, because he did.
Welcome.
No.
Welcome to the show, bud.
No, I'm just trying to talk about anything but this bucket, okay? Anything but this bucket.
Well, it's, you know what? The bucket's inevitable.
Oh, God.
I'm gonna say this one time, and then we're going to move on to the third here. I better not catch y'all out here having sex with the bucket. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
That's the only time we're going to say it. Jesse, let's move on to the third.
All right. Yeah, Elmo, things are going pretty bad. All right, let's talk about Nick Saban golfing with Travis Scott and 50 Cent. Okay, so over the weekend, Saban, part of this superstar-filled golf event at the Floridian National Golf Course, raising money for a foundation benefiting disadvantaged children with a focus on STEM classes. So he gets paired with 50 Cent and Travis Scott. And Kristen Saban took to Twitter. She was having the time of her life. She was like, Dad played golf with Travis and 50 Cent like it was NBD. Retirement is going too well. And I gotta say, I mean, who is crushing retirement more than Nick Saban right now? Come on.
I really do think, Dad, there's going to be a market for like a Nick Saban and Bill Belichick. If Bill really is taking a gap year or might be done all together with coaching, these two guys have shared history. We've seen them do content before. I feel like following them around for stuff like this would be something that everyone would be in. Get to see these guys smile and experience joy after years of misery and yelling at people. This sounds great.
But here is what Nick's going to fall into because of the workaholic that he is. Now, he bought a place in Jupiter Island, $17.5 million waterfront home. And a lot of golfers own property down there as well. And so there's a lot of golf going on. So leave it to Nick Saban to saying, I've been having a great time. Everything has been great, but my golf game is not as good as I'd like it to be. You know this guy is going to grind. He is going to go grind on the golf course because you know he's going to be playing in a lot of these tournaments, and he wants to be better than he is right now.
Absolutely. Nick Saban's going to be grinding down there. I'd like to see someone explain the Dune popcorn bucket to him and film that reaction. If your reaction's still positive, download, subscribe, rate, review us, and stick with us. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you tomorrow.